Believe it or not, Dr. Seuss was big news this week as progressives decided that the beloved children's author needed to be destroyed. At some point, woke totalitarians decided that the man's back catalog was too spicy for the modern day. And this week is Read Across America Week, a week where children are encouraged to read in schools, and this of course often heavily features Dr. Seuss because the late author is obviously a big figure in children's literature. This made it a great time for the woke censors to raise awareness and get the Biden administration to drop mention of Dr. Seuss from the program. They were also able to pressure the company who handles the author's legacy into canceling 6 of his own books, saying that they were just too offensive for the modern day. The reaction from conservatives and the middle-of-the-road classic liberals was both predictable and understandable. We got the normal barrage of articles and talk radio soliloquies going on and on about how ridiculous this all is, and man, can you believe it, the progressives have done it again, cancel culture is going to ruin us all, it's finally gone too far, cancel culture is going to destroy our free exchange of ideas, all of the things that we hear over and over again whenever we see the newest, most outrageous thing that progressives have decided to destroy. And look, I understand. I have done this myself many a time. This is a mindset that is easy to slip into because it does feel like this never-ending barrage that is always coming at you, destroying everything that you think is safe. Even the most innocuous stuff becomes too offensive. It's very easy to kind of just look at this and produce the outrage, sit there shocked, talk about how you can't believe it, and then before you've even really had time to process, the next more crazy thing comes down the line and you're shocked and outraged all over again. It's a never-ending cycle. And when you're first looking at this stuff, to some extent, cancel culture does seem like a winning issue. It does seem like a winning strategy to talk about because it's the kind of thing that wakes people up. They are shocked that something they cared about and they loved is suddenly canceled. And this has had a lot of people turning away from the more extreme left when they see something they hold dear or that they value has suddenly become too extreme for their political allies. There really is a small but sizable portion of the left that will take a look and reevaluate its situation when they see this kind of cancel culture happening. But I don't think that in general, this is actually a good long-term understanding of what's going on. I don't think that the way that this issue gets discussed currently is going to be a good long-term strategy for those that oppose the progressive movement. I think it's time for those on the right to discard the terminology of cancel culture, because I think it is ultimately flawed and we need a better way to present this to people to make them truly understand the nature of the problem. One of the problems I have with the phrase cancel culture is that it implies that America still has an agreed-upon monoculture which people are transgressing against. A shared and unified understanding of what's acceptable and not acceptable that we all can observe. But this is very clearly not the case. America's culture has become increasingly fractured, especially along red-blue lines and along urban and rural lines. These people are living very different existences and have very different standards of behavior, very different expectations, and there's increasingly very little overlap when it comes to the moral expectations across these cultural fault lines. When we use the phrase cancel culture, it frames the discussion in a way that makes it seem like we're having some kind of collective dialogue, some kind of conversation in our society where the conservatives and right-wingers are given a voice and input. But this is very obviously not the case. This stuff is being dictated to the right wing, to conservatives, to people who disagree with the woke agenda. It is being pushed down, crammed down on them. They have no input at all. And any attempt to engage with a discussion on what's happening simply gets used as evidence of racism, xenophobia, homophobia, white supremacy, whatever buzzword is being used at the moment. This is not a discussion on culture. This is not some kind of ongoing process where we figure out what's acceptable and what's not. This is a particular standard being forced down and dictated down to at least half the country, if not more, on a regular basis without any input. And any attempt to engage in input, any attempt to have that discussion is immediately grounds for your destruction. Those who oppose progressivism need to stop calling this cancel culture and instead call it what it actually is. It's political persecution. This is not woke college students, it's not the outrage mob at the New York Times. This is the exercise of power by a politically advantaged class who is suppressing the culture and the thoughts of those they see as beneath them. And beyond obfuscating political persecution behind some kind of cozy language, the phrase cancel culture also often creates tactical confusion inside the right and even the moderate left, which opposes this kind of behavior. This formulation of cancel culture makes your average conservative and moderate liberal think that showing any kind of moral or cultural preference is the actual problem. They actually start believing that those who oppose woke culture must show no preference at all when it comes to culture, which is how you end up with brain-dead tweets like this one. When Star Wars actress Gina Carano gets fired off a Disney project for disagreeing with the progressive mob, you actually have major conservative figures closely aligned with the Trump administration saying, no, of course, you can't cancel your Disney subscriptions. You're not allowed to fight back against the woke ideology. You're only supposed to oppose their cancellations. You can't actually do any canceling of your own. You have to be above all this stuff. And this kind of idiotic libertarian thinking is how we ended up here in the first place. There is no such thing as a value-free or value-neutral cultural space. If you leave a void, if you withdraw and have no standards and have no values in an area, someone will rush in and take that area and impose their own values. The problem with what we have been calling cancel culture is not the fact that someone has values or has standards that they are imposing in the public square. That is not the issue, and if you think it is, you are desperately misunderstanding what is going on. Someone's values will always control the public discussion. Someone's boundaries will always be imposed on the public debate. There is no such thing as a value-neutral public space, and when you pretend there is, you are only opening yourself up for defeat. This idea of cancel culture that so many conservatives hold to is this idea that we must unilaterally disarm from culture, that if we just step back and don't try to impose our values, then the other side will eventually do the same and will win the day. But that is not what happens. When you are in a culture war and you unilaterally disarm, you lose. You get crushed, and that is exactly what we have been seeing for decade after decade after decade. The phrase cancel culture is a problem because it encourages the right to frame this whole debate in a way that makes it think that stepping away from the values discussion, stepping away from having standards in the public square is the way to victory. It is not. It is a guarantee of defeat. And just like in a real war, anyone who is trying to tell you that unilateral disarmament is a good idea is probably trying to get you killed. The idea of the open marketplace of ideas, the value-neutral public square, is a liberal fiction. And as James Burnham said, liberalism is the ideology of Western suicide. Thanks for watching, guys. As always, if you like the video, please go ahead and click like. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is a great time to do so. If you want to follow me on Twitter or support me on Subscribestar, like any of the fine people who are currently being shown on screen, you can follow the links below the video to do that. There's also a merch store for the show, so if you want to go through that link and support the show by buying a mug or a sticker, that would be great. Also, I went ahead and started a channel on Odyssey, so if you prefer to watch content over there, the link for that is also in the description. Thanks for watching, guys, and as always, I'll talk to you next time.